Hey, time out. Which Bible are you talking about? The one with 83 books, or 82 books, or 77 books, or 66 books? Well, unusual score. It's pretty interesting that you're living up to your namesake and keeping score. So let's go ahead and dive into that right now. Hey everyone, my name is Josh. Welcome to Overtime, a series of videos where we look at some of the most popular comments in the comment section on our Timeout series, and we do a deep dive to unpack the conversation a bit more and have some dialogue. So today we're talking about the Bible. Who wrote it, and how did it come to be? You see, oftentimes opponents of Christianity will utilize the process of how the Bible came into being to discredit its authenticity or trustworthiness. The critique is that because humans were involved, the Bible can't be trusted, and therefore it's just a document that's been compiled by humans from 2,000 some odd years ago, and we should probably just move on. So in today's video, I'm actually going to walk through the process of how the Bible came to be and make an argument for why it still is trustworthy and useful for our lives today. First, there are 4 different accepted canons among the Christian church: the Roman Catholic, the Orthodox, the Protestant, and the Ethiopian church. Now, they share different Old Testaments, but the New Testaments are all the same. And this is important for our purposes today because we're going to be limiting our focus to the New Testament, as this is what Christianity comes out of and bases as its primary books for learning and developing a relationship with Jesus. And the variations within the Old Testament deserve a separate video, as there's so much material to cover, much more so than the time of this video would allow for. So let's break it down. The New Testament is regarded as 27 books that are divinely inspired. Now, the words divinely inspired can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So for our purposes, we're going to define it simply as God's providence was involved with the creation and collection of these books. The books include the Gospels, Acts, various letters, and Revelation, and they were written before 120 AD. Writings attributed to the apostles actually circulated among the earliest Christian communities. The Pauline epistles were circulating perhaps in collected forms by the end of the 1st century AD. Clement of Rome, who was the Bishop of Rome from 88 AD until his death, actually knew of some of Paul's letters together with some of the words of Jesus. And this is crazy because this is within 50 years of the ascension of Christ. Now, a defined set of 4 Gospels was asserted by Irenaeus in 180. Irenaeus quotes and cites 21 of those books that would end up being a part of the New Testament. Likewise, the Muratorian fragment is evidence that perhaps as early as 200, there existed a set of Christian writings somewhat similar to the 27-book New Testament canon, which actually not only included 4 Gospels, but actually also argued against objections to them. And then within the New Testament itself, there's actually a reference to at least some of the works of Paul as scripture. 2 Peter 3:16 says, he writes, and he is a reference to Paul here, the same way in all of his letters, speaking in them of these matters. His letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures, to their own destruction. The reference to, presumably the Septuagint, as the other scripture denotes that the author of 2 Peter regarded at least the works of Paul that had been written by his time as scripture. What's important to realize about this is what's necessary to be a follower of Jesus, which is belief in the death, burial, and physical resurrection of Christ, is actually already agreed upon by the middle of the 2nd century. So it stands to reason that by the time these things were actually being codified and written down, they were already being used in house churches that were popping up all over the world by this point. So it seems clear to me then that the early followers of Jesus actually believed that something legitimately happened, and they needed to preserve that thing so they could pass that on to future believers. And so the next 200 years would follow a similar process of continual discussion throughout the entire church and localized refinements of acceptance. Now, this process was not complete by the time of the First Council of Nicaea in 325, but there was a bunch of progress that had been made by that point. But what's super important is in his Easter letter of 367, Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, gave a list of books that would become the 27-book New Testament canon. Thus, while there was a good measure of debate in the early church over the New Testament canon, the major writings are widely accepted by almost all Christians by the middle of the 3rd century. You see, oftentimes we'll see things like secret gospels, or every once in a while you'll catch an online article that reads like, this is the gospel that the church doesn't want you to see. And these can be pretty titillating because if you're unaware of the historical rigor with which these books were seriously debated, chosen, and some subsequently rejected, you may not actually know of how silly of a claim these things are. You see, the process of canonizing, which is basically a fancy way of saying the process of collecting scripture and denoting which writings were authoritative, happened really early and very publicly. See, for the early followers of Jesus, making sure they got this process down as accurate as possible was an important reality. There were people who would try and come along and say certain things about how the Bible was supposed to be processed and created, and some of them were actually rejected. Probably one of the best examples of this is a gentleman by the name of Marcion. Marcion was a bishop of Asia Minor who went to Rome and was later excommunicated for his views. But he may have been the first to propose a definitive, exclusive, unique list of Christian scriptures compiled sometime between 130 and 140 AD. Even though Marcion's views are rejected, there are already gospel-like documents floating around along with Paul's letters. And Marcion is someone who is working within these authoritative frameworks to determine which documents should be kept and which ones should not be kept. Now this is awesome because it shows that throughout all of these different regions, over the thousands of years of historical events and the some 40 different authors, there's a nucleus of consensus around what would become authoritative Orthodox Christianity. And many of those same books are the ones that we still read today, and they all affirm the same reality, that Christ is who he says he is and he came back from the dead. Here's the key thing to focus in on. Unless you believe that a holy book came down from heaven on a pillow and is to be accepted and never questioned, the idea of the Bible coming together through various stages shouldn't trouble you. Hopefully it actually encourages you. The fact that we have historical documentation of this canon coming together and we can read about the events that led to this allow us to see God at work in and through people all throughout history. Unlike other religious texts, the fact that you can see the diversity of all these hands on it contributing to its final form, done in the open, not in secrecy, allow us to see God at work through people, instead of simply having to take one religious guru's word for it. This, I'd argue, is actually one of the most important parts of Christianity. You can see the historicity of it in a rich way. It's documented for you and for me to look at. Now to me, this shows actually the work of a personal creator who didn't simply make the world and peace out, but instead is working in it and through it with people to create better opportunities for individuals to know him and have a relationship with him. So that's canon. That's the Bible, that's how it came to be. What do you think? Are you convinced of these things? Do you think I'm totally crazy? Leave a comment and let us know because we want to keep the dialogue moving. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you in the comments.